Welcome to week 3 of Principles of Property Management. You may notice many of my videos show me wearing a sweatshirt and my hair up in a clip because we're almost always doing something to our house. We bought kind of a fixer-upper about a year and a half ago. We've been doing projects here and there, getting ready to tear out the kitchen. Just had the electrician here to move a couple wires, and now we're going to make a mess. Hope you won't be offended by my attire. Sometimes I look nice. I do it right after work when I'm more attractive. I have been enjoying reading your posts, and I noticed that some of you are perhaps a little more shy about writing than others, and I wanted to just touch base with you about your writing just a little bit. I appreciate it when you try and flesh out your work a little bit. Some of you have been doing a great job at that, and some of you, things have been a little skinny, and I just encourage you to keep explaining yourself. It's easy to get in your head, and you know what you're talking about, and you know what you mean, and it's hard to step back and look and think about how somebody else reading it might see it if they didn't have the background information to fill in the blanks that you already have in your head. If that helps you at all for what I'm looking for, I just would appreciate that you explain yourself a little bit. And if you tell me something, I would like to know why you feel that way or why you think that. And again, some of you are great and have been doing a really good job. I encourage you to go back and look at the syllabus where I talk about my expectations for word count for your discussion boards and for completing the case studies, and I think you'll find that helpful. If you're not sure about the word count, you can write it out in a Microsoft Word document, and then there's a way for you to go back to the file page. It will tell you how many words you have, so you can then see if you're going to be close to what I'm looking for. And so I encourage you to do that as well. A couple more housekeeping items, looking at my notes. There are sample quizzes at the end of every chapter in your textbook. I strongly encourage you to go through those and make sure you understand the question and the answers, and review the chapter and make sure that you know how to answer those. Sometimes the quiz that you take at the end of the module will have the exact same question in it or one that's very similar. So if you have had the opportunity to check out those sample quizzes, I know that you will find them helpful. And it's also a good review because sometimes the assignments or discussion boards that I have are not going to closely follow the chapters like that, but the final exam will have some things from the chapters that will be maybe taken from the sample quizzes. Just kind of a word to the wise, and I think it'll help you with your understanding of the concepts. Chapter 3 has a lot of legal kind of information in it. It's a long chapter, longer than some. It's a little more meaty. It starts out talking about the types of business entities that you might want to conduct business as, starting with the sole proprietorship, which is any person just saying, I'm a business, and conducting yourself as a business. You're a sole proprietorship, or a husband and wife team would be considered a sole proprietorship. You report all your income and expenses on your individual tax return, so it's all on one tax return. The downside of that is if you ever get sued for something, you're liable. Personally liable. So your own personal assets could be attacked if somebody got a judgment against you. There are other entities that you can form that require consulting with an attorney in most cases that will shield you from some of those challenges, kind of make you a little more judgment proof, as the term goes. Not that you're probably ever going to run into this, but it's always good to plan ahead. I used to work in a law office, and many times we had clients come in and say, I sure wish I had checked with you, the attorney, before I did some of these things and thought about these things beforehand. It might have saved me some trouble later on. You always want to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. One of the entities that is very common for people to set up is a limited liability company, most often referred to as an LLC. Limited liability company is comprised of members who have agreed to form something similar to a partnership, but they develop an agreement that sets forth how much they will each contribute to the company and how the company will be run and what happens if additional money is needed or how the profits will be split and that kind of thing. Another option that is often used, but not maybe as much anymore, is a corporation. You can file an S election with the IRS for an S chapter, Chapter S corporation, but the corporation itself is a creation of the state. And you have stockholders in a corporation, and you have bylaws and a shareholders agreement that govern how you run your corporation. Most corporations are not like the publicly traded ones on Wall Street, where you have IBM or Microsoft or some of those where you have gajillions of shares of stock and just as many stockholders. Many corporations are much smaller. It may be a family corporation. It may be a few business people getting together to form a corporation, and they are the shareholders. So those are not publicly traded, and they have fewer requirements, and your shareholders agreement and bylaws tell you how that will be run. There's also general and limited partnerships. I don't spend as much time on those because they're not very common anymore. They used to be. Just be aware, if you decide that you and your buddy want to get together and do something together as a business, and you don't have any kind of formal entity set up, you're considered a general partnership. And you're each liable for the activities of the partnership, just like a sole proprietorship. And the downside of that is if you don't have a written agreement, you're going to end up in court if you ever get in a dispute. But like I said, those are not anywhere near as common anymore. It's just if you decide you want to go into business with someone else, it's a really good idea to try and have some kind of formal agreement, no matter how you want to set that up. A shameless plug for the legal profession. Even though attorneys get a bad rap and there are lots of lawyer jokes out there, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you can find an attorney who you're comfortable with, who has some experience in setting up business entities, I highly recommend it. I also recommend it strongly if you are getting ready to enter into a management agreement with a property owner, to have that attorney review the documentation first before you sign anything. There's a saying we used to have in the law office, and what it means is if you sign a document, you're pretty much liable for it. It's called you sign, you die. So you're stuck with it. The courts will not accept an argument that you didn't understand or it was a mistake. In most cases, they're going to say you are deemed to have read it and know what's in it, and if you signed it, you're responsible for it. So I always recommend people, before they sign any kind of contract that might have some kind of long-reaching effect like that you have an attorney review it. Now, one of your case study this week is to look at a sample management contract, and based on the concepts in your chapter, look at it and give it a brief review and see what you think it has that's good and what's lacking. And I'll just give you the heads up on that. Not that you're going to play junior lawyer, but it's always a good thing to have some general idea of what you're doing, even when you're going to have an attorney look at it for you. I will say that I'll give you some other tips here. If you're getting ready to, this goes for whether you're getting ready to rent a place to someone or if you're getting ready to sign a management agreement with a property owner, there are a couple other places you can look for information if you want to know what you're getting into. And one of those is the Idaho Supreme Court Repository. That has a listing of any speeding tickets, DUIs, small claims cases, bigger court cases and lawsuits, judgments against people. If you've ever been evicted from somewhere, that will show up. All of the courts in Idaho contribute their data to this repository, and you can go and look someone up and see if they've ever had a judgment entered against them for anything, or if they have sued a lot of people. Sometimes that's instructive. I've run into a couple people who think their mission in life is to file a lawsuit every time they don't like something somebody did. And, you can think long and hard about whether that's a property owner that you would want to work for. These are all things that go into making these kinds of decisions. And so that's a place that a lot of people don't know about. If you Google Idaho Supreme Court Repository, REPOSITORY, it will take you to a page. Now they're moving away to a new electronic filing system, and it's called iCourts. Twin Falls County and Ada County are the first two counties on iCourts. So there will be a link to direct you to that new place where you can look up. Ultimately, those things will all be combined in one database, but right now you have to look at Twin Falls County separately at this new website, or Ada County. But all the rest of the counties are under that old Supreme Court repository. It's fun to look yourself up, by the way, and see, what's there. It kind of lives on for quite a long time, and sometimes it's kind of fascinating. So always know that employers or others might be looking you up too. It's always good to know what's there so you don't have any surprises later on. Can't do anything about it. It's not like your credit report where you can dispute it, because it is something that happened in the court system. The only exception to that is if you were a juvenile and something happened, those records are sealed. And also if you're getting a divorce or have had a divorce, many times those records are sealed as well, because they contain personal identifying information or things about children that would not be public. But everything else is kind of there, and you're kind of stuck with it. But I always say knowledge is power, so knowing what is out there about yourself is generally a good idea. But it's a great tip to look for things about people. Let's see. Another thing the book talks about, I did want to highlight just a little bit, is being someone's agent. When a property owner hires you to manage property, most likely you are going to be seen as the property owner's agent. Now, that's not the same as a real estate agent. That's not what it means. Agent or agency are legal terms, meaning that any act that you do on behalf of that property owner, he is liable for you, just as if he had done that act himself. And that's why it's very important that you know what duties you have, what the property owner has delegated to you as a manager. And it's good for the property owner to be aware of what he's getting into as well, because he's going to be responsible for the things you do. And you will have the authority to bind that property owner to agreements. If somebody files a claim against you for violating a fair housing law, it's likely the property owner would have some liability there as well. So these are just good things to make sure that you're aware of and that you know that terminology. The other concept that you might not be familiar with is the concept of a fiduciary duty. Fiduciary duty is the highest standard of care that an agent could owe a property owner. You owe that owner loyalty, honesty, and to put your own interests behind that of the other person's. And it's a very strong duty in the law. And so I would review that section very carefully as well, because managing property for someone else is a huge responsibility. There are new laws every day that sometimes you don't even know you're violating, or that you don't know exist because you want to comply, but maybe it's something that you haven't heard about before. It's really important, because for both property owners and managers to understand that you're developing this relationship with each other, and you owe each other, have certain obligations to each other. So I just want to encourage you to take another second look at that section of your book. Finally, I've gone ahead and opened up Assignment 1 for you. Assignment 1 is the first of a series of 4 assignments, in which you are going to ultimately have a piece of property where you develop a management plan to market that property, to figure out some budgeting and accounting for that property. And to start with, we're going to look at a management plan where you're going to do an analysis of your own community and come up with some demographic and economic background information to do a report for a potential property owner who's considering hiring you to manage property for him or her. Now, this is it's not specific to any kind of property. What I'm looking for in this assignment is for you to do some research outside of your book and find out what you can find about your area where you live. I know many of you are in Twin Falls County, and so that's a good place to get a lot of information, or Twin Falls City is also acceptable. If you live in Declo or Richfield, you're probably not going to have anything specific to your city, but you'll want to choose perhaps a region, a county, or maybe even you'll have to go farther than that and say, you know, Magic Valley or Upper Magic Valley or whatever the terminology is for that area. But you are going to need to look for some information on what is the economy of the area. What kind of business is there? If it's heavily agricultural, well, that might inform your decision about whether or not you decide you put an office building, because maybe there aren't any office workers there, so maybe that wouldn't be a good choice. Or if you're getting ready to maybe look for building some apartments near CSI campus, is that necessarily where you would want to put an over 55 apartment building for senior citizens? So these are the kinds of decisions that people make every day. They're looking what is the best use and what's going to maximize my return on investment. Similar to the readings that you've had in the past in this class about what are we going to put in all these big box areas where Kmart went away because they've gone out of business, or now what are we going to put in that facility because we have this building here. These are the kinds of things that people look at all the time. What's the traffic patterns here? Who comes here? What kind of businesses do we have here? So that's what I'm looking for, is for you to do some research about the area where you live and give me a report on what you think, a recommendation you think would make sense for your community. Now, it's any kind of property. It could be residential, which is single-family homes or apartment buildings. It could be office space. Many times there are lots of office parks and places. There are industrial or commercial spaces that are warehouses and things like that. Or it could be retail stores. It could be strip malls, it could be big box, it could be anything like that. So those are the four main property types, and I want you to choose one of those property types, I don't care which one, and make an argument for why you think, based on your research, that property type would do the best in your area. I am not going to check and see if you're right. There is no right or wrong, but I need you to tell me why you made the decision you made based on the research, and support your answer with why. Explain the information you found out in your research, and choose a property type you think makes sense, and support your choice with explanations. And I will be so happy. I don't care if it's right or wrong or indifferent. With that having been said, I hope that you all have a lovely week. I guess we're supposed to get some more rain and snow later on, and I'm sure it seems as if winter will never end, but I am sure that it will eventually. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and again, if you ever have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to email me or call. As I explained earlier, I am tied up pretty busily during the day, but I do have lunchtime, and I also I'm available in the evenings and then on the weekends. And I really don't want you to be shy about getting a hold of me if you have any questions about the assignment, which will be due, by the way, in 3 weeks, or if you have any concerns and questions about anything else at all. Thank you.